Welcome back to the channel. In this entry, we'll be taking a look at Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, specifically from the 1990 film iteration. When it comes to the path of evil, the traits of jealousy, insecurity, and narcissistic ego are vices that would often steer one towards that route. For the Shredder, we find this to be certainly the case. An envious and volatile man driven to deviousness from the instability of his prideful rage. A cruel and archaic leader who preaches on the virtues of honor, yet hypocritically only uses others for his own selfish goal. Originally known as Oroku Saki, the Shredder was a martial artist in Japan, and just from the brief moments we get of him in the flashback, we can gather a few attributes of his personality. A picture speaks 1,000 words, and just from this one segment we see of his former self, it appears that Saki is a man who is resolute, boisterous, and hateful, traits that would undoubtedly surface from what he deems to be a thorn in his side, his rivalry with a fellow shadow warrior known as Yoshi. Given that Splinter was able to defeat Shredder in one swift move, we can readily conclude that Yoshi was very much superior to Saki in terms of their skill in the martial arts, as a student is not greater than their master. While not the biggest factor, it's likely that this repeated loss was one of the elements that contributed to Saki's resentment against Yoshi. Both of them were competitors in everything, but not so much in their conflict over the same love interest in a woman named Shin. Unfortunately for Saki, Shin loved only Yoshi. This love triangle resulted in much animosity, to the point that Yoshi and Shin fled to America in hopes of a new life, leaving Saki to burn in his resentment. The fact that Yoshi was willing to leave Japan and his status as one of the country's top warriors in exchange for a laborious job in the U.S. bears testament to the possibility that Saki gave the couple a most distressing time, to say the least. Unable to accept this rejection, Saki trailed them to America and killed Shin in cold blood out of his vindictive nature. It's here that we can pinpoint one of Saki's main character flaws, his inability to handle rejection and the resulting violent outcome, which in turn arises from his narcissistic personality disorder, also seen in his other behavior later on. So effectively, it would be fair to place the Shredder amongst the ranks of real-life psychotic ex-boyfriends who end up with a jail term over a failed romantic relationship. A normal and emotionally healthy person doesn't resort to murder in the event of a rejection. As with most narcissists, Saki saw it as an attack on his self-esteem and became enraged. Yoshi becomes his victim too, after coming home from work unarmed and left in a vulnerable state from seeing his deceased wife. With the objects of his anger eliminated, Saki now calls himself the Shredder and decides to remain in New York. It's unclear as to why he doesn't return to Japan, but perhaps it's due to the fear that his actions have been a stark departure from the values he supposedly preaches, namely that of honor, loyalty, and discipline. Should word of his misdeeds become public in Japan, he would become a social outcast just like the juvenile delinquents that he attracts under his wing, so his chances of success would be higher if he were to start fresh in a new country with new prospects. Not to mention, there is an inherent sense of shame from the events of Yoshi's murder as well, but not so much from the perspective of a guilty conscience, as a narcissist like him would probably have a limited scope to feel shameful for their misdeeds. But it's another thing altogether when the mark of shame is apparent on his face, in the form of his disfigurement after Yoshi's pet rat attacked him in retaliation. That's something he'll have to live with for the rest of his life as a source of shame. The fact that he was bested by an animal as lowly as a rat. The Shredder's narcissism is further seen in his setting up of the Foot Clan in New York, a secret faction of ninja thieves that once operated in ancient Japan. For the Shredder, this clan is nothing more than a cult, serving to cater to his need to be worshipped, again an extension of his prideful nature. In his dealings with the clan, it's plain to see that the Shredder is endeavoring to make himself appear more than just a man, which would exalt the clan's perception of him and make him more deserving of worship. Perhaps it is for this reason that he is always fully clad in armor draped in a long flowing cape, with his face masked and the deliberate altering of his voice to make it sound unnaturally coarse, raspy, and vicious. The spikes on his armor, particularly on his helmet, his shoulders, and his wrists, serve as an aggressive message of telling others to keep their distance. This notion is also exemplified in his combat style, his weapon of choice being a spear to maintain a separation between him and his opponents. To build up his following, the Shredder preys on the outcasts of society, dangling the elusive carrot of acceptance that these young delinquents never had from their family, with the Shredder going so far as telling his followers to address him as Father. A sense of purpose is bestowed upon them with his reward and ranking system, where members who prove themselves worthy get the right to wear the Shredder's symbol of the dragon on their headbands. By observing the lifestyle that is propagated by the Foot Clan, it all comes down to the notion of doing whatever you please and taking whatever you want, a sentiment of the Shredders that he has replicated in his cult. This is evident by the state of their hideout, a location stocked with all kinds of teenage prohibited vices and an abundance of entertainment. Adherence to formal authority is despised, as the members are regularly brought out to engage in thievery to earn their keep, while using the ninja skills that they were taught to avoid detection. Given that the Foot operates in the realm of the invisible, the realm of ninja, this proves to be a problem for the local police and result in a crime wave that plagues the city. But as their evil amasses, fortunately the forces of good would rise to counter them, but in the most unlikely of heroes in the form of 4 giant mutated turtles named after the Renaissance artists and trained in the art of ninjutsu. Of course, at face value, the Shredder seeks to eliminate Splinter and the Turtles for opposing him directly in the stopping of his clan's activities, but even if it weren't so, he would still kill them for the fact that they are a walking and talking reminder of his former arch-nemesis, Yoshi, practicing the same brand of martial arts that he did. In all this, it's clear to see that there is nothing redeemable of the Shredder's motives, who is simply committing crimes and inciting others to do the same for the selfish benefit of bolstering his fragile ego. The fact that 4 turtles raised by a rat in the sewers can recognize the fault in his morality speaks to how blatantly wrong his actions are on a fundamental level. Following his defeat at their hand, the Shredder appears to adopt the mantra of "if you can't beat them, join them." Realizing his personal army is outmatched, he seeks a new form of subjugates, this time using the same ooze that created the turtles to create his own mutated minions. But this effort is tainted by one mistake, that the animals his men chose were still babies, leaving him with suboptimal soldiers. When his plan fails yet again, the Shredder decides to take matters into his own hands, self-administrating the ooze and transforming himself into an abomination. Being consumed with rage, he causes his own demise, a fitting conclusion for someone who lived a self-absorbed life.